Hey, if you're running a business in Quebec, you are absolutely going to want to listen up. There's been a huge update to the workplace health and safety laws, and it really does affect every single company, no matter how big or small. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know, and probably more importantly, what you need to do.
And that brings us to the big question, doesn't it? Is your workplace actually ready for this new law? Because let's be honest, this isn't just about avoiding some fines, it's about making sure your team is protected. We've put this whole thing together to be your guide to getting there.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the new law itself, then we'll dig into this really critical idea of the 20-worker threshold. After that, we'll look at what's required for smaller businesses versus larger ones, walk through a 5-step guide that works for everybody, and then wrap up with what it really takes to build a true culture of safety.
Okay, first things first, let's just get the official name out of the way. It's called the Loi modifiant le régime de santé et de sécurité du travail. Whoa, that translates to the Act to Modernize the Occupational Health and Safety Regime. It's a bit of a mouthful, right? So for the rest of this, we're just going to call it the LMRSST. Much easier.
Now, you might be thinking this whole LMRSST thing is brand new, but here's the twist. It's actually been rolling out in different phases since way back in 2021. But the date you really need to circle on your calendar is the one at the end there. The final No More Excuses deadline for getting this all done is October 6th, 2025. The clock is definitely ticking. So what you have to do under this new law really hinges on one single simple number, 20. Yep, whether you have more or fewer than 20 workers is what decides the entire path you're going to have to follow.
And as you can see, this creates two very different paths. If you have fewer than 20 workers, you'll need what's called a plan d'action, or an action plan. But if you have 20 or more, you've got to develop a much more detailed programme de prévention, or a prevention program. So the obvious next question is, how in the world do you count your workers?
Now, before you just do a quick head count, hold on. The law is super specific about who counts as a worker. You have to include everyone, full-time, part-time, even interns and people from temp agencies. The only people you don't include are folks in management roles, like your supervisors or directors. It is absolutely critical to get this number right because it literally dictates everything that comes next.
All right, so if you did your math and you came in under 20, this next part is just for you. We're going to break down exactly what this action plan is all about. So, what is an action plan, really? At its heart, it's a practical, written document. You, the employer, are responsible for creating it, and its main job is to figure out your safety priorities and then map out some concrete steps to actually make your workplace safer.
The goals here are pretty straightforward. It's all about getting your team involved, making sure everyone knows who's responsible for what, and giving some real structure to your safety efforts. But the most important thing to remember is that this has to be a living document. It can't just be something you write up and then shove in a drawer. You have to update it periodically to keep it useful.
Okay, now for all of you with 20 or more workers, your requirements are, well, they're a lot more extensive. Let's dive into the prevention program.
The prevention program is a much bigger deal. And notice the two huge differences here. First, it requires worker participation to develop it. And second, its goal isn't just to manage dangers, it's to eliminate them right at the source. That's a big shift in thinking.
And when I say it's comprehensive, I am not kidding. The law says your program has to cover all 8 of these specific areas. We're talking way beyond just pointing out risks. You need detailed plans for safety training, procedures for handling hazardous materials, even a whole assessment of your first aid services. It's a true 360-degree view of safety.
The whole philosophy of the prevention program is built on this brilliant idea, the hierarchy of controls. It forces you to think in a specific order. The very first question you have to ask is, can we just get rid of this hazard completely? If you can't, you move down a level. Okay, can we replace it with something safer? You just work your way down the list, and as you can see, personal protective equipment, or PPE, is dead last. It is always the absolute last resort, never your first move.
Okay, so deep breath. Whether you're making an action plan or a full prevention program, the good news is the process for actually getting it done is pretty similar. So let's walk through a 5-step guide that works for everyone.
The whole thing really breaks down into 5 manageable steps. First, get a team together. Then, go through your whole workplace and list out every possible risk you can find. Step 3 is where you analyze and prioritize those risks. From there, you build your actual plan with real actions and deadlines. And finally, and this is so important, you put the plan into action and you keep monitoring it to make sure it's working.
So how do you prioritize risks? I know it can feel kinda abstract, but a simple tool like this risk matrix makes it totally concrete. You just plot how severe an injury could be against how often the hazard happens. A risk that's both very serious and happens all the time, like that one in the top left corner, well, that becomes your #1 priority. Something that's not serious and hardly ever happens can probably wait.
And this is what step 4 should look like in the real world. Your plan can't be vague. It needs specific actions, a real person assigned to each one, and a hard deadline. This is what creates accountability and makes sure things actually, get done.
As we wrap up, let's zoom out and focus on what might be the most important part of this whole thing. Complying with the LMRS FEAST-T, it isn't just about checking a box or filling out a form. It's a massive opportunity to shift from just thinking about compliance to building a real, lasting culture of safety.
So, what does it really take to succeed? Well, it pretty much boils down to these 5 things. You need real, genuine commitment from the top. You need everyone to participate. You need a feeling of shared responsibility. You need a good, organized plan, and you need to be constantly evaluating how you're doing. If any one of these is missing, your safety plan is at risk of just becoming another piece of paper.
Which leads us to our final thought. As you start this process, just ask yourself this one simple question. Are you just creating a document to stick in a filing cabinet? Or are you actually building a culture of safety that protects every single person who walks through your doors? The choice really is yours.